The moment my son shouted, "Mom, give my wife your room or get out," I knew something inside me had snapped. What he didn't know was that I owned the house, and by the time I was done, they'd be the ones walking out, not me. I never thought I'd live to see the day my own flesh and blood would look at me like I was a burden. Not after everything I'd done. Not after raising him alone. Not after sacrificing my youth so he could have a life I never had. But life has a dark sense of humor. It started on a quiet Sunday morning. Sunlight coming through the kitchen window, coffee brewing, the house smelling like the cinnamon rolls I made every weekend. For years, this house had been my pride, the place I built from the first real money I ever earned. And then the front door slammed open. Ethan, my only son, walked in like he owned the place. And right behind him was his wife, Brianna, wearing that expression. That smug, entitled little half smirk she always had when she wanted something. "Mom," Ethan started, not even bothering with a greeting. "We talked about this. Brianna needs the master bedroom. It's more spacious, the light is better, and she's pregnant. So just move to the guest room." I stared at him. Not shocked, no. I passed shocked months ago. But tired. Bone deep tired. "Ethan," I said calmly, "I'm not giving up my bedroom." That's when he snapped. His face hardened, voice rising so loud the windows rattled. "Mom, stop being stubborn. This is our house now. Give my wife your room or leave." Those words hit me harder than any punch ever could. My son, my boy, the same kid who clung to my shirt when he was scared of thunderstorms. The same boy whose birthday cakes I stayed up all night making. The same boy I worked double shifts to feed. Now he was staring at me like I was in his way. But what he didn't know, what he never bothered to know, was the truth. This house wasn't his. It never was. I never put his name on the deed. Not after the choices he made. Not after the woman he married. So I inhaled deeply, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "All right, Ethan, if that's what you want." He smirked. Brianna smirked. They thought they won. They had no idea what was coming. The second Brianna opened her mouth and said, "This house needs younger owners," something inside me turned ice cold. They weren't just trying to take my room, they were planning to take my entire life. Ethan folded his arms like he was laying down the law, but it was Brianna who stepped forward first. She always did, because in her mind, she wasn't married to my son. She owned him. "Look," she said, her voice sugary sweet, "it's not that complicated. You're older. You don't need that big room. We're starting a family. We deserve the master bedroom." Deserve. That word burned more than her tone. "Deserve," I repeated, eyebrows rising. "Brianna, I worked my whole life for this house. You don't get to walk in and—" She cut me off with a smirk. "Actually, we do. Because Ethan and I agreed this place should be ours now." Ethan nodded quickly, like a trained puppet. I saw it in his eyes. Guilt flickered for half a second. But he pushed it down, swallowed it, and stood taller. "Mom, you always say you want us to have a better life. Well, this is it." I stared at him. A better life? By kicking me out of my bedroom? By treating me like a guest in my own home? The coffee pot beeped behind us, a small, ordinary sound, but it felt like the last thread holding my patience snapped. I walked past them silently, grabbed my mug, poured myself coffee, and sat down at the dining table as calmly as I could. "Sit," I told them. They blinked, confused. "We need to talk," I added. Brianna huffed. "We're not children." "No," I said, sipping my coffee. "But you're acting like you own something that doesn't belong to you." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Mom, stop being dramatic. Just move to the guest room. It's not that serious." I looked at him long, slow, cold. "You're right," I said softly. "It's not that serious." But what I meant was very different. Because while they stood there thinking they were taking control, I had already made my decision. They wanted my room, my house. Fine, they would get exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected. When Ethan leaned in and whispered, "Just accept it, Mom. This house is ours now," he didn't know he had just given me the final push I needed to do the one thing I should have done months ago. He stood there, towering over me like he expected me to break, like he thought I'd just sigh, nod, and hand my life over on a silver platter. But instead, I smiled. A small, calm, controlled smile that confused them both instantly. Brianna frowned. Why are you smiling? I shrugged lightly. Just thinking. Ethan exchanged a look with her the kind couples do when they think they're on the same team. A look that said, she'll give up if we push a little more. He sat across from me at the table, leaning forward. Mom, listen. Brianna and I have big plans. We're going to renovate the kitchen, turn the backyard into a play area. And play area. I repeated. You mean, for your baby? He nodded proudly. I tilted my head. Tell me, Ethan, when exactly were you planning to tell me about the baby? His mouth opened and closed. Silence. Brianna shifted uncomfortably. It was the first time her confidence cracked. So that was it. They weren't just trying to take the room. They were preparing to take the whole house, my house, and turn me into their free nanny, maid, and babysitter. All without even telling me the first major news in their life. Mom, we were going to tell you, Ethan muttered, eyes dropping. When? I shot back. After I moved to the guest room? After you two took over the master bedroom? After you claimed the house as yours? He didn't answer because we all knew the truth. They weren't going to tell me. Not until it benefited them. I took a deep breath, slowly stood up, and walked toward the window where sunlight touched a framed deed hanging on the wall. My name. No one else's. Not his. Not hers. Mine. I turned back to them. Ethan, I said, voice steady. Do you know why your name isn't on the deed? He blinked, confused. What? Why does that matter now? I smiled again, but this time, it wasn't calm. It was cold. It matters, I said, because you're standing in a house that doesn't belong to you. Their faces shifted, slow realization creeping in. Brianna's confidence melted into shock. Ethan's cockiness cracked. And in that moment, I wasn't the powerless mother they thought I was. I was the woman who owned every brick, every wall, every inch of the place they thought they controlled. And soon, they would understand that. Very, very clearly. When Brianna scoffed, you can't make us leave, Mom. I knew it was time to stop playing small. I wasn't just going to defend my room anymore, I was about to take back everything. I sat back down at the table, leaning on my elbows, eyes locked on them. You think you can walk in here and take over my house? I asked quietly, letting the words hang like smoke in the air. Brianna rolled her eyes. It's not like that. We're family. You don't need to be so dramatic. Family. Funny word. The same one Ethan used when he demanded my room. The same word Brianna wielded like a weapon. Family doesn't force you out of your own home. Family doesn't step over decades of love and sacrifice as if it were nothing. I stood slowly, letting the tension build. Dramatic. I repeated, voice rising, controlled but sharp. No, I call this reality check. Ethan swallowed nervously, finally realizing the mother he thought he could bully wasn't backing down. I could see it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the tiny cracks in his confidence. I pulled out the deed from my pocket. The thick paper felt heavy in my hands, though it was just paper. But the power behind it, the power was everything. This house, I said, holding it up, belongs to me. Every word on this paper, every brick, every wall, every corner is mine. And you're standing in it like you have the right to order me out. But here's the reality. You don't. And soon, you're going to learn just how serious I can be. Brianna scoffed nervously, but there was hesitation in her voice now. Mom, you wouldn't do anything drastic, would you? I smiled. This one wasn't friendly. It was measured, cold, and deliberate. Oh, I would, I said. I already have. Ethan blinked. What do you mean? I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of papers, contracts, listings, and notices I had quietly prepared over the last few weeks. Every one of them meticulously planned. Every move calculated. You see, while you two were busy planning to take over my life, I've been planning too, I said. And the plan is about to take effect. By the time you realize it, the tables will have turned. And you'll be the ones leaving. Their mouths opened and closed like fish out of water. Shock replaced arrogance. Fear flickered in the corners of their eyes. Mom, what did you do? Ethan finally whispered. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, calm as a winter morning. What I should have done a long time ago, I said. When Ethan realized I had already set the wheels in motion, his confidence shattered. They thought they owned the house, but in reality, the countdown to their exit had already begun. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. Breakfast, coffee, Small talk, the kind of domestic normalcy they expected from a mother who'd just been forced out. Ethan and Brianna moved through the house like rulers surveying their kingdom, laughing, pointing at rooms, and imagining future renovations. I smiled politely, poured my coffee, and let them bask in their delusion. Because here's the thing about illusions, they crumble the fastest when people think they're in control. By mid-afternoon, the phone rang. It was the notary I had secretly contacted weeks earlier. I held the receiver, listening quietly, nodding. My heart raced, but my expression stayed calm. Yes, everything is set, I said softly. Proceed. Thank you. Hanging up, I took a deep breath. The dominoes were set. Every contract, every notice, every legal paper was finalized. My house was about to enforce its own justice. Ethan came into the kitchen, cocky as ever. Mom, are you coming to help us plan the living room remodel, or are you just going to sit there drinking coffee all day? I looked at him, smiling faintly. I'll help, but on my terms. Brianna tilted her head. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, letting each word land, that in 3 days, this house is going to be all yours, in the way you least expect. Their eyebrows shot up. Wait, what do you mean? I leaned back in my chair, swirling my coffee like a calm storm. By the end of the week, you'll have all the space you think you're entitled to, but the reality, you'll be leaving, and I'll be the one staying. The laughter died in the room. The arrogance drained from their faces. Brianna's smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of panic. Ethan's jaw tightened. You can't do that, Ethan stammered. I already did, I said simply. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. The house, my home, my sanctuary, was about to reclaim itself from the people who thought it was theirs to take. That evening, I watched them from the kitchen window, walking through the rooms they had coveted, oblivious to the trap I had laid. They had no idea, and that was the beauty of it. By the time the week ended, the ones who tried to force me out would be the ones walking away, empty-handed, humbled, and finally respectful. They thought the week would pass in comfort and entitlement. They didn't know I had already planned every move, every letter, every notice, every twist that would force them out of my house for good. The next few days, I played the perfect host. I smiled while Brianna unpacked in the guest room, pretending I didn't notice her sneaky glances at the master bedroom. I nodded politely while Ethan bragged about future renovations and imagined turning the backyard into a play area for the baby. They were living in their fantasy world, and I was content to let them believe it. Behind closed doors, though, I was busy finalizing the last steps. Notices, legal documents, and small but irreversible changes were all set to activate at exactly the right moment. Wednesday came, quiet and ordinary. They lounged on the sofa, planning interior designs, laughing as if they had already won. I watched them from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, my heart steady. Calm, cold. You look calm, Brianna said suddenly, her voice carrying that forced sweetness she always used when nervous. I smiled lightly. Why wouldn't I be? Everything is going according to plan. Ethan frowned. Plan? What plan? Your eviction plan, I said lightly, letting the words hang in the air. Don't worry. It's almost done. You'll see soon enough. The shock was immediate. They froze. The playful arrogance drained from their expressions. You can't, Ethan stammered. I already did, I said softly, taking a sip of my coffee. By Friday, you'll be gone. Brianna's hand flew to her mouth. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said, I replied. I gave you the illusion of control, the fantasy of entitlement. But reality has a way of catching up to people who forget whose house it is, and whose rules apply here. The tension was thick. Silence filled the room. Even the clock ticking on the wall sounded louder, like a drumbeat counting down the hours until their departure. I stepped closer, letting the gravity of my words settle in. Enjoy the rooms while you can, because very soon, they won't be yours to walk through anymore, and you'll have nothing but your arrogance to show for it. They stared at me, disbelief and fear flickering in their eyes. And in that moment, I felt a surge of satisfaction, not cruel, not petty, but just, finally, justice for years of disrespect, entitlement, and threats. By Thursday morning, The tension had reached its peak. They were still pretending to feel in control, but the first domino of my plan was about to fall, and there was no stopping it. I woke up early, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Coffee in hand, I walked through the rooms, making sure everything was ready. Every letter placed correctly, every signature in order. Ethan and Brianna were still asleep, blissfully unaware that their carefully constructed fantasy was about to crumble. By a.m., I had made a few discreet phone calls, the final legal confirmations. Notices that would trigger their departure had been filed, timed perfectly to leave them no room to argue. I returned to the living room just as they stumbled downstairs, yawning and rubbing their eyes. "Morning, Mom," Ethan said, trying to sound casual. "Sleep well?" Like a queen, I replied, smiling. "And you?" Brianna flopped onto the sofa, exhausted, but ready to start the day. They had no idea. The first notice arrived at the door mid-morning, delivered with the usual formality of a legal process server. I stood in the kitchen pretending to read a recipe while they found the envelope. Ethan picked it up, curiosity flickering across his face. He opened it slowly, expecting something trivial, maybe a bill or a routine reminder. But what he read made his face pale. "Mom, what is this?" he whispered, voice tight. I walked calmly into the room, holding my coffee like it was nothing. "That, Ethan," I said gently, "is the beginning of the end." Brianna snatched a notice from his hands. Her eyes scanned the pages, disbelief turning into panic. This says we have to leave. In 3 days? I nodded, taking a deliberate sip of coffee. "Exactly. 3 days. Plenty of time to pack your things. I even made it easy for you." Ethan sank into the chair, stunned, staring at me like I had grown horns overnight. You can't do this. This is insane." "I already did," I said simply. "And it's legal. Everything is by the book. By Friday, you'll be gone." Silence filled the room. Even the air seemed heavy, watching the shift in power. They had been so sure, so arrogant, and now the reality of their entitlement crashing down on them was inescapable. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm, power, and satisfaction wash over me. The first domino had fallen, and the rest would follow soon. By Thursday afternoon, the illusion of control Ethan and Brianna clung to had completely shattered. They realized too late that I wasn't bluffing, and panic began to creep into every glance, every movement. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Brianna frantically flipped through the papers, her hands trembling. Ethan stood behind her, jaw tight, fists clenched. You can't just make us leave," Ethan shouted, his voice shaking for the first time in years. "I already did," I said, calm and unshaken, stirring my coffee slowly. "It's all legal. Everything is set. You have 3 days." Brianna turned to me, eyes wide, voice high-pitched. "This is ridiculous. We live here. We're family." "Family doesn't force the people who built the house to leave," I replied evenly. "It respects them. And respect is exactly what you've lacked from the moment you stepped through that door." Ethan's hands flexed as if he could physically grab control from me. "Mom, you're being unreasonable." I laughed softly, but it was sharp, deliberate. "Unreasonable? I'm protecting my life, my home, and my peace." You're just learning that your entitlement has consequences." Brianna gasped, looking around as if searching for support. But the truth was clear. No one was coming to save them. Over the next few hours, I let the tension build naturally. I answered polite questions about the coffee machine, the thermostat, even the trash schedule, all while letting the reality of the notices hang like a storm cloud over their heads. Every glance I gave them, every calm smile I flashed, reminded them they were not in control. Ethan finally sat down heavily on the sofa, slumping in defeat. "Mom, this isn't fair." I leaned against the counter, coffee in hand. "Life isn't fair, Ethan, but it is what it is. And in this house, the rules have always been mine, always will be." By evening, their panic had transformed into quiet plotting. They whispered, glared, and cast wary looks at me, trying to imagine a loophole, a way out. But I had covered every base. Every move I had made was airtight. And as they went to bed that night, unease replacing their arrogance, I knew the final act was coming, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. By Friday morning, the clock was ticking loudly in the house. Ethan and Brianna were trapped in their own panic, and I could feel the pressure building every second, bringing them closer to the inevitable. I woke up early, before the sun had fully risen. The house was quiet, still, as if holding its breath along with me. Coffee in hand, I walked slowly through the hallways, checking one last time that everything was in order. The notices had been filed, the legal papers finalized, and the delivery confirmation signed. There was no escape, no loophole, and no chance of negotiation. Ethan stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, already looking tense. "Mom, are you really going to do this?" I looked at him, calm and collected, and smiled faintly. "I already did." He blinked, swallowing nervously. "But we live here." "And yet," I said slowly, letting each word land, "you will leave. By tonight, the house will be mine again." Brianna appeared behind him, clutching her phone like it could save her. "You can't just kick us out," she said, voice rising. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, savoring the calm before the storm. "I can. And I will. You've had your chance to respect me and this house. You chose entitlement and arrogance instead. Now you'll experience consequences." They exchanged a glance, panic written clearly across both of their faces. Ethan's usual cockiness was gone, replaced by fear and frustration. Brianna's smirk had completely vanished. The rest of the morning passed with them whispering to each other, pacing the living room, and throwing worried glances my way. I stayed calm, pretending to read the newspaper, letting them stew in their own anxiety. By lunchtime, the realization had sunk in. There was no negotiation, no compromise, no escape. They were trapped by the very house they thought they could take from me. When I finally looked up, I could see the fear in their eyes, the subtle shaking in their hands, the tight set of their jaws. And I knew, without saying a word, that the first cracks in their arrogance had begun. I poured another cup of coffee and smiled to myself. The final act was near. By the end of the day, the house would reclaim itself and they would be forced to walk away, humbled and defeated. By Friday afternoon, the tension had reached a boiling point. Ethan and Brianna still hoped for a miracle, but the final notice was about to land, sealing their fate. I had spent the morning calmly preparing the last piece of my plan, the final legal notice. Every line was carefully worded, every signature confirmed. By the time it arrived, there would be no room for argument, no loopholes, no delays. Ethan and Brianna were pacing the living room when the knock came. Their heads snapped toward the door. I walked over slowly, smiling faintly, and opened it. The process server handed me the envelope, and I accepted it as if it were just another piece of mail. I turned to Ethan, holding it casually. "Looks like your patience has run out." What is that?" he stammered, stepping closer, panic rising in his voice. I smiled and handed him the envelope. "The final notice. Read it carefully. Every detail has been set. By the end of today, the house is mine again. And you will leave." Brianna snatched a paper from his hands and scanned it frantically. Her eyes widened. Fear replaced the arrogance that had defined her every movement for weeks. Ethan sank onto the sofa, gripping the edge tightly. "Mom, this isn't fair." I walked calmly past them to the kitchen, coffee in hand. "Fair," I said softly, shaking my head. "Life isn't fair, Ethan, but it is what it is. You've disrespected me, my home, and my years of hard work. This is just consequences catching up with you." Brianna's voice cracked. "You can't legally do this." I turned slowly, eyes steady, voice firm. "Oh, I can, and I already have. Every signature, every confirmation, every law checked and double-checked. By tonight, you'll be gone, and the house will be mine again." They looked at each other, panic spreading through their expressions like wildfire. Their fantasy had collapsed. Their arrogance was replaced by fear. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock. Then Ethan whispered, almost to himself, I can't believe this is happening." And I smiled. Not cruelly, not maliciously, just satisfaction. Satisfaction that after years of disrespect and entitlement, justice was finally being served. The final act had begun, and by the time the sun set, the house would reclaim itself. By late Friday afternoon, Ethan and Brianna's panic had evolved into desperation. They were grasping at straws, trying to find a way out, but the reality of the house's legal hold over them was undeniable. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the tension in the living room. Ethan and Brianna sat at the dining table, their hands intertwined but trembling, whispering frantic plans to each other. I poured another cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, observing silently. Every twitch, every whispered word, every darting glance was music to my ears. They had underestimated me for too long. Brianna finally looked up, her voice trembling. "Mom, please, can't we just figure something out? We'll pay you anything." I smiled faintly. "Pay me? This isn't about money, it's about respect. You've had neither since the moment you walked through that door." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. We can leave peacefully. Just give us some time." I shook my head. "Time's already been given. You had your chance to treat this house and its owner with respect. You failed. Now it's time for you to leave." Brianna's hands flew to her face. "We can't. There's no way. What will people think? Our friends, family." "Exactly," I said calmly. "They'll see what entitlement and disrespect can do. You've forced your own hand." Ethan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Panic was now fully in control. He realized that their arrogant plans had backfired completely. Every smug look, every dismissive word, every casual assumption, they had all led to this moment. I walked slowly toward them, coffee in hand, and let the weight of my words settle. "Enjoy your last hours," I said softly. "Take in every inch of this house while you can. Soon, you'll have nothing here but memories and lessons learned the hard way." Brianna's face turned pale. Ethan's eyes darted around the room, looking for any loophole, any escape. But there was none. The house, my house, had claimed its justice. For the first time, they were fully aware that the power had shifted completely, and there was nothing they could do to reverse it. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Ethan and Brianna realized the clock was unforgiving. Their time in the house was almost up, and there was no escape from the consequences they had brought upon themselves. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the living room, stretching across furniture that had suddenly become theirs only in illusion. Ethan paced, glancing repeatedly at the clock, while Brianna sat with her head in her hands, whispering hurried plans that came to nothing. I moved through the house calmly, tidying up small things, pouring coffee, checking the mail, acting as though it were just another ordinary Friday. Every step I took reminded them silently I was still the master here. "You really mean it, don't you?" Ethan asked, his voice low, almost defeated. "I already did," I replied softly, setting down the coffee cup. "Everything is final. By tonight, this house will be mine again. You have no say in it." Brianna's eyes filled with tears. "We've made mistakes. We'll respect you. Just please don't make us leave like this." I shook my head slowly. "It's not about forgiveness anymore. It's about accountability. You had your chance. You chose entitlement and arrogance. And now, you're learning that actions have consequences." The air in the house was thick, tense, suffocating almost. Every tick of the clock felt louder, more unforgiving. Ethan leaned against the wall, shoulders slumping, realizing the reality he had ignored for far too long. I can't believe this is happening," he whispered. "You can believe it," I said, stepping closer, voice steady. "Because this is reality. You live here temporarily, but the house belongs to me permanently, and your time here is coming to an end." Brianna tried to speak, but words failed her. Fear had replaced every trace of arrogance, and desperation had drowned out her usual manipulations. For the first time, they understood completely. No amount of whining, pleading, or scheming could reverse what had been set in motion. The final act was already underway, and by sunset, the house would reclaim itself entirely. And in that quiet, tense moment, I felt a sense of calm satisfaction. Not anger, not cruelty, just justice. The justice they had forced me to enact. By the early evening, reality had fully sunk in. Ethan and Brianna could no longer ignore the truth. They were about to lose everything in the house they thought they owned. I watched from the kitchen as Brianna gathered boxes and began stuffing items into them, her hands shaking slightly. Ethan hovered nearby, holding tape and scanning the room like he was looking for a loophole that didn't exist. Their movements were hurried, desperate, chaotic. Every misplaced item, every rustle of packing paper, reminded them that time was not on their side. "You really mean this?" Brianna whispered, eyes wide with panic. I leaned against the counter, sipping my coffee slowly. "I already made it clear. This house is mine. Everything in it belongs to me. You'll have your belongings, but not the control you've tried to take." Ethan grunted, frustration and defeat mingling in his expression. "Mom, we didn't think you'd actually do it. We assumed you'd fold like always." I smiled faintly. "Fold? That stopped being an option the moment you demanded I leave my own home. You forced my hand, and now I'm simply reclaiming what's mine." Brianna froze for a moment, tears brimming in her eyes. We didn't realize." "I didn't realize either," I said calmly. "I realized I was done being pushed around, done being treated like a guest in the house I built, done being disrespected by my own child and his spouse." They exchanged a glance, the weight of shame finally settling in. Every smug look, every demand for entitlement had led to this moment. Hurried packing, panic, and the dawning understanding that they were powerless. I moved past them, checking small details, the placement of boxes, the doors locked properly, the deed in a safe spot. Every little step reinforced the fact that the house and my authority were intact. By the time the sun began to dip lower, shadows stretching across the floor, Ethan and Brianna were quietly packing, avoiding eye contact with me. The arrogance that had dominated the house all week was gone, replaced by fear, defeat, and respect they had refused to give before. And in that quiet, tense evening, I knew that the final hours of their reign were upon us. As the evening shadows grew long, Ethan and Brianna finally faced the truth. They had no allies, no escape, and no way to reclaim control, and I was ready to make sure they understood it fully. I walked into the living room, calm and composed, holding my coffee. Their hands paused mid-motion as they stacked boxes, eyes darting nervously toward me. "You know," I said softly, letting each word land like a hammer, "this house is mine, and it always will be. You've had your fun, but the time is up." Brianna's voice trembled. "Mom, please, you don't have to be this harsh." I shook my head, leaning against the doorway. "Harsh? I'm being fair. You got what you wanted, for a little while. But respect, honesty, and consideration, those aren't optional, and you failed to offer them." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "Mom, can we just talk this out? Find a compromise?" I laughed softly, a sound devoid of humor. "Compromise? There is no compromise when you demanded I leave my own home. You made your choice, Ethan, and now the consequences are here." Brianna's eyes welled with tears, and for the first time, I saw fear overpower her usual confidence. We'll leave," she whispered. "Yes," I said, nodding. "By tonight, every corner you tried to claim will belong to me again, and you'll understand what it means to underestimate the person you're supposed to love and respect." They didn't argue anymore. The weight of reality had crushed their arrogance. They moved silently, gathering their remaining things, aware that each passing minute brought them closer to leaving permanently. I moved calmly through the room, checking the locks, making small adjustments, savoring the quiet authority that had returned. Each action, though simple, reinforced the fact the house and I were untouchable. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the house had shifted back into my hands. The dominance, the control, the sanctuary, it was all mine. Ethan and Brianna had learned a lesson they wouldn't forget. And as I stood in the doorway, watching them leave box by box, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Not vengeance, not cruelty, just justice served, and a home reclaimed. As the sun finally set, the last box was carried out. The house was silent, finally mine again, and the lesson had been delivered loud and clear. The golden light of the evening filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Ethan and Brianna moved slowly, exhausted, carrying the last of their belongings. I stood at the doorway, coffee in hand, watching quietly. Every step they took was a reminder of the power they had tried to seize and lost. Brianna hesitated for a moment, looking around the room she had imagined as hers. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "We shouldn't have underestimated her." Ethan nodded, his face pale and serious. No more arrogance, no more smug looks, only respect, grudging and earned, filled their expressions. I finally spoke, my voice calm but firm. "You've learned a valuable lesson today. Respect is not optional. Entitlement has consequences, and boundaries are non-negotiable." They didn't reply. They only nodded slightly, understanding fully that words were unnecessary now. The last box was carried out, the front door closed, and for the first time in a week, the house was quiet. The silence was not empty, it was triumphant, filled with the calm authority of a home reclaimed. I walked through each room slowly, savoring the spaces that were mine once again. The master bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, every corner held the memory of my struggle, my fight, and my victory. Ethan and Brianna had tried to take everything, but in the end, they had only reinforced one undeniable truth. This house belonged to me. Sitting down with my coffee, I allowed myself a deep, satisfied breath. The fear, the arrogance, the entitlement, it was all gone, replaced by respect, understanding, and a lesson that would remain with them forever. For the first time that week, I felt complete peace. The house, my sanctuary, my life, was mine again, and nothing, not their demands, not their threats, not their arrogance would ever take it from me again. With Ethan and Brianna finally gone, the house was quiet. The battle had ended, but the weight of the week lingered, and I finally had time to reflect on everything that had happened. I walked slowly through the empty rooms, letting the silence wash over me. The echoes of arguments, threats, and demands seemed distant now, replaced by the calm certainty that the house and my life was back under my control. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, looking out at the backyard. Sunlight danced across the grass, painting everything gold. For the first time in days, I felt safe, unchallenged, and completely at peace. The week had been exhausting, emotionally draining, and at times terrifying. But it had also reminded me of something important: my strength, my resilience, my ability to stand firm when others tried to undermine me. Ethan and Brianna had come in with arrogance, entitlement, and a belief that they could dictate my life. And yet, despite everything, I had stayed calm, planned carefully, and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. I smiled faintly, remembering their expressions when the final notice arrived, when panic first replaced arrogance. The realization that their control was gone, their plans ruined, was almost poetic. This house had been my sanctuary long before they tried to take it, and it would remain so. Every brick, every wall, every corner held my memories, my sweat, and my determination. No one could take that away, not my son, not his wife, not anyone. I poured another cup of coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. The fight was over, the lesson delivered, and the house was mine again. And in that quiet reflection, I realized something even more important. Victory isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's found in calm strength, in patience, and in knowing that standing up for yourself is worth every battle. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the satisfaction of justice, the relief of reclaimed space, and the profound peace of knowing that, at last, I had won. The dust had settled, the house was mine again, and I finally had a moment to process everything that had happened. The aftermath of the week was quiet, but the lessons lingered loud and clear. I walked through the living room, noticing the small signs of the chaos that had occurred over the past week. A box left slightly ajar, a cushion moved out of place, faint scuff marks on the floor from hurried footsteps. It was a reminder of everything Ethan and Brianna had tried to take, and everything they had failed to steal. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, settling into my favorite chair. The sunlight streamed through the window, and for the first time in days, I felt grounded. The week had tested me. It had pushed me to my limits, challenged my patience, and forced me to confront people I had once trusted. But it had also shown me something invaluable: my own strength. Ethan and Brianna had assumed they could manipulate, intimidate, and take control, but their actions had only strengthened my resolve. I had learned how to stay calm under pressure, plan meticulously, and reclaim my life without losing my dignity. I glanced around the house, letting the quiet sink in. Every room, every corner, every memory now felt untouched by their arrogance. The house was mine again, not just in name, but in spirit. And though the week had been exhausting, I felt a sense of pride. Pride in standing my ground, in defending my home, and in showing that entitlement and disrespect have consequences. The lesson they would carry with them was simple: never underestimate the person whose home you try to take. Never assume that arrogance and entitlement can overpower experience, wisdom, and determination. I took a deep breath, savoring the calm. The storm had passed. The house was reclaimed. And though Ethan and Brianna would leave with lessons learned the hard way, I would remain stronger and more secure than ever. The aftermath was quiet, but the victory, it resonated loudly in every corner of the home, echoing the truth: this house, my sanctuary, my life, would always be mine. Even after the boxes were gone and the house was silent, Ethan and Brianna carried the lesson of the week with them. Some lessons are learned the hard way, and this one would stick forever. I stood at the doorway, watching them load the last of their things into the car. Brianna clutched a small bag, her face pale and exhausted. Ethan helped her, moving slower than usual, weighed down by the reality of what had happened. "You've learned a lot this week," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. Ethan looked up, eyes wide and serious. We got the message." Brianna didn't speak. She only nodded, swallowing the pride that had once made her so confident. As they closed the car doors and prepared to leave, I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. Relief that the house was finally quiet, and satisfaction that the lesson had been delivered without unnecessary cruelty. "You should remember something," I said, taking a step closer. "Respect is earned. Arrogance and entitlement will only take you so far. Always think twice before you try to take what isn't yours." Ethan swallowed hard. We understand, Mom." Truly, Brianna's eyes welled up, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely humbled. "We're sorry," she whispered. "We didn't realize. We were wrong." I nodded. "Good. Now you know. Let this be the last time you forget who really holds the power in someone else's home." They hesitated a moment, then finally got into the car. As I watched them drive away, I felt the tension lift, replaced by calm certainty. The house was mine again. Every room, every memory, every corner belonged to me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt fully at peace. Sometimes life teaches lessons in harsh ways, but those lessons, especially the hard ones, leave marks that last forever. And I knew Ethan and Brianna would never forget this week. As the sun set behind the trees, casting a golden glow over my reclaimed sanctuary, I smiled softly. The house was quiet, safe, and mine. And finally, everything was as it should be. With Ethan and Brianna finally gone, the house was quiet again. But the peace that settled over the rooms wasn't just silence, it was a hard-earned victory. I moved through the living room slowly, letting my fingers graze the furniture, the walls, the floor. Everything was back in its rightful place. Every object, every memory, every detail belonged to me again. Sitting by the window with my coffee, I watched the sun dip lower in the sky, painting the room with warm golden light. The tension, the stress, the fear, all of it had vanished. The past week had been a whirlwind of emotions: anger, frustration, fear, determination, and finally, triumph. But now, as the quiet settled in, I could finally breathe and reflect on the lessons learned. Ethan and Brianna had come in with arrogance, entitlement, and the belief that they could control my life. But I had stayed calm, planned meticulously, and taken back what was mine. The house wasn't just a building. It was my sanctuary, my safe space, the place where memories were made and preserved. And that had been worth fighting for. I took another sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. The peace in the house wasn't fragile. It was hard-won, fortified by my strength, patience, and determination. Every room felt alive again, not with fear or tension, but with calm authority. I had reclaimed not just the space, but my sense of security, my control, and my dignity. I smiled softly, thinking about the lesson Ethan and Brianna would carry forever. Never underestimate the person whose home you try to take, and never mistake entitlement for power. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely at ease. The storm had passed. The house was quiet. The peace was restored. And everything was exactly as it should be. Sitting there in the golden evening light, I realized that some victories are silent, but they resonate louder than words ever could. And this victory, my victory, would echo through the house forever. With the house finally calm, I sat quietly, reflecting on the week that had tested me and realizing just how much stronger I had become. The evening air was cool and calm as I opened the window slightly, letting the gentle breeze sweep through the house. It was quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. The tension that had gripped every corner had finally lifted. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat in my favorite chair, thinking back on the past week. The arrogance, the entitlement, the threats, they had all come at me like a storm. But storms pass, and what remains is the strength you gain from weathering them. Ethan and Brianna had believed they could overpower me with their confidence and assumed control. They had forgotten one critical truth. I had spent years building not just a home, but a life grounded in patience, resilience, and unwavering determination. I reflected on each confrontation, each tense moment, and each clever step I had taken to reclaim my space. The power of calm, planning, and confidence had outweighed their panic and arrogance. The house was more than bricks and walls. It was my sanctuary. It had witnessed my victories, my struggles, and now my triumph. Every room seemed to hum with the quiet energy of justice finally served. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the week lift entirely. There was no need for anger, no need for resentment. The lesson had been delivered, the house reclaimed, and the peace restored. Looking out the window, I felt proud of standing firm, proud of asserting my boundaries, and proud of teaching a lesson that would linger long after the dust had settled. Some lessons are harsh, some are silent, but the ones that change people forever are unforgettable. Ethan and Brianna would carry this one with them for the rest of their lives. I took a final sip of coffee, smiling softly. The house was quiet, my heart was steady, and my spirit stronger than ever. The week had tested me, but it had also reminded me of my own strength, resilience, and the power of standing your ground. And as night fell over the house, I knew this peace, the quiet, hard-won victory, would stay with me forever. The house was quiet now, but the echoes of the week lingered. Some lessons leave marks that last forever, and Ethan and Brianna would never forget theirs. I walked slowly through the rooms, noticing details I hadn't before. A cushion straightened, a framed photo dusted, a plant placed just so. Everything had returned to its rightful place, reflecting the calm and order I had fought to preserve. The past week had been exhausting. The tension, the arguments, the constant awareness of their entitlement, it had all tested my patience and resolve. Yet, each challenge had strengthened me, reminding me of what I was capable of. Ethan and Brianna had walked in confident, arrogant, and dismissive. They had believed they could take control, that their plans were untouchable. But I had stayed calm, planned carefully, and reclaimed my home without ever losing my composure. Every notice, every legal step, every carefully timed action had been deliberate. I had given them the illusion of power, only to show them that respect and boundaries are not optional, they are non-negotiable. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the lessons learned, not just for them but for myself. The week had shown me the importance of standing firm, trusting my instincts, and never allowing anyone to undermine what I had built. Ethan and Brianna had left humbled. They had learned that arrogance and entitlement carry consequences, and I had learned that calm strength, strategic planning, and patience can reclaim even the most threatened sanctuary. The house once again felt whole. The walls no longer carried the tension of conflict but the quiet satisfaction of victory. I had not only protected my home but also reinforced the respect and authority that had always been mine. I smiled softly, letting the quiet fill me. The week was over, the lessons delivered, and the house reclaimed. Ethan and Brianna would remember this week forever, and so would I. Some victories are loud, some silent. This one was quiet, profound, and lasting. The house was mine, the peace restored, and the lesson etched into memory for a lifetime. The house was finally quiet. Every room, every corner, every memory belonged to me once again, and the feeling of reclaiming it was indescribable. I walked through the living room, brushing my fingers across the furniture, feeling the familiar textures beneath my touch. Every inch of the space belonged to me, untouched now by entitlement or arrogance. The week had been a whirlwind, testing not just my patience but my very resolve. The arguments, the tension, the sneaky attempts to assert control, it had all been exhausting. Yet in the end, calm strength and careful planning had restored order. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and sat in the sunlit corner by the window. The golden light reflected off the floors, filling the house with warmth. For the first time in days, I felt completely at peace. Ethan and Brianna had left humbled. Their confidence had been replaced by respect, their arrogance washed away by the consequences of their actions. They had learned a lesson they would never forget. As I gazed around the rooms, memories of years past filled me with gratitude. This house had witnessed so much family gatherings, quiet mornings, celebrations, and challenges. And now it had survived yet another storm, stronger and more secure than ever. I reflected on the lessons of the week, not just for them, but for myself. Standing firm, trusting my instincts, and asserting my boundaries had made all the difference. I had reclaimed my sanctuary, my home, and my peace. The air in the house was calm now, carrying the subtle energy of justice, strength, and victory. Every corner, every wall, every memory was mine again. I smiled softly, taking another sip of coffee. The week had tested me, challenged me, and ultimately reminded me of my own power. The house was quiet, my heart was steady, and the lessons learned by everyone would linger forever. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the rooms, I felt it fully. Home was reclaimed, peace was restored, and the battle was finally over. Even though the house was quiet, the lesson lingered. Ethan and Brianna had finally learned that respect is earned and entitlement has consequences. I walked through the kitchen, adjusting a few small things, noticing how the house finally felt like mine again. The air was calm, the tension gone, and the space filled with quiet authority. The week had been more than a battle over rooms and possessions. It had been a test of patience, resilience, and strength. Each moment of confrontation, each subtle maneuver, and every legal step had reinforced one undeniable truth: respect matters. Ethan and Brianna had come in with arrogance, believing their confidence gave them power. But power isn't claimed through entitlement, it's earned through patience, strategy, and understanding boundaries. I sipped my coffee slowly, reflecting on how the week had unfolded. The fear, the panic, the eventual acceptance, it had all been part of a process, a natural consequence of their actions. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the house had reclaimed its energy. Every corner, every room, every memory was now untouched by entitlement. The arrogance that had filled the air for days was gone, replaced with calm and order. I thought about Ethan and Brianna. They had left humbled, carrying a lesson that would stay with them forever. Entitlement cannot replace respect, and arrogance cannot overpower patience and wisdom. The house, my sanctuary, had survived the storm. It had withstood intrusion, manipulation, and threats. And now, in its quiet, golden light-filled glory, it reminded me of its resilience and the importance of defending what truly belongs to you. I smiled softly, finishing my coffee. The week was behind me, the battle over, and the lesson delivered. Peace had returned, stronger and more profound than ever. And as I looked out the window at the fading sunlight, I knew this truth would endure not just in the house, but in everyone who had witnessed the consequences of disrespect. Some victories are silent, some lessons are learned the hard way, but the ones that last forever, they echo through time. And this one would echo in Ethan and Brianna's hearts forever. With Ethan and Brianna gone, the house seemed to exhale, as if it had been holding its breath all week, and now, finally, it could breathe again. I walked through the living room, fingers lightly tracing the back of the sofa, feeling the calm energy settle over the space. The tension that had weighed so heavily for days was gone, replaced by a serene, almost tangible peace. Sitting in my favorite chair, I let my gaze drift across the room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing in the warm glow. The silence was profound, a reward after days of chaos, panic, and confrontation. Ethan and Brianna had tried to claim control, to assert their presence, to make the house theirs. But their plans had failed. They had underestimated the power of patience, strategy, and resolve. I thought back to the week, the arguments, the panic, the legal steps, the silent planning, and the final notices. Every move had been deliberate, a careful orchestration to restore order and reclaim what was mine. The house seemed to hum with quiet satisfaction. Every wall, every floorboard, every corner had witnessed the struggle and the triumph. It was more than a building. It was a sanctuary, a testament to resilience and boundaries defended. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth spread through me, savoring the calm. The lessons delivered to Ethan and Brianna were clear. Respect is earned, arrogance is punished, and entitlement cannot replace understanding. Walking through each room, I felt a sense of gratitude. The house had survived the storm, emerging stronger and more serene. And I had emerged stronger too, reminded of the power of calm strength and unwavering determination. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the floors. Shadows stretched, highlighting the corners, the furniture, the memories preserved. The house breathed again, alive with quiet authority. I smiled softly, setting down my cup. Peace had returned, hard-won and lasting. The house, my sanctuary, was truly mine once more, and the echoes of the lessons learned would linger forever. With the house finally quiet, I reflected on the week that had tested me and realized how much stronger I had become because of it. I walked slowly through the empty rooms, letting my fingers graze the furniture and walls. Everything was back in its rightful place. The chaos, the panic, the entitlement all gone. The house had been restored, and so had my peace of mind. Sitting by the window with a fresh cup of coffee, I let the sunlight warm me. The past week had been exhausting, but it had also been enlightening. Every confrontation, every tense moment, every carefully planned move had reminded me of my resilience. Ethan and Brianna had come in with arrogance and entitlement, thinking confidence alone could give them power. But they had underestimated one thing: my patience, my strategy, and my ability to stand firm. The lessons they learned had not been cruel, they had been necessary. Respect is not optional. Boundaries are not negotiable. Arrogance and entitlement have consequences. I reflected on my own journey, realizing how much strength I had gained from asserting myself, defending my home, and reclaiming my sanctuary. The house was more than walls and furniture. It was a testament to my perseverance and resolve. I glanced around, noticing the small details, the sunlight reflecting off the floor, the neatness of each room, the calm energy that now filled every corner. This house had survived the storm, stronger and more serene than ever. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet envelop me. The week was over. The lessons were delivered. The house was mine again, and I felt a profound sense of satisfaction, calm, enduring, and unshakable. Some victories are quiet. Some lessons are learned the hard way. But the ones that last, the ones that teach respect, boundaries, and strength are unforgettable. As I sipped the last of my coffee, I smiled softly. The house, my sanctuary, my life, was fully reclaimed. Peace had returned, and I knew that no one would ever take it from me again. The house was finally quiet. The storm was over, and peace settled over every corner along with the profound lessons of the week. I walked slowly through the rooms one last time, letting my fingers brush the furniture, the walls, and the floors. Every inch of the house belonged to me again. Every memory, every detail, untouched by arrogance or entitlement. Sitting by the window with a fresh cup of coffee, I watched the sun dip below the horizon, bathing the rooms in a golden glow. The tension of the past week was gone, replaced with calm, satisfaction, and a quiet sense of triumph. The events of the week had been exhausting emotionally, mentally, and even physically, but they had reminded me of my own strength. I had faced disrespect, manipulation, and arrogance head on, and I had emerged victorious. Ethan and Brianna had learned lessons they would never forget. Respect is not optional. Boundaries are not negotiable. Arrogance has consequences, and entitlement is never a substitute for understanding or decency. As I walked through each room, I felt the house breathe again. It was more than a building, it was a sanctuary, a testament to perseverance, patience, and the power of standing your ground. I took a deep breath, savoring the quiet and the sunlight dancing across the floors. Peace had returned, hard-won and lasting. The house, my sanctuary, was truly mine again. And in that calm, golden evening, I realized something profound. Life will test you, people will challenge you, but the victories that matter most are the ones you earn with patience, courage, and unwavering belief in yourself. The storm had passed. The house was safe. The lessons were delivered, and I was at peace. As night fell and shadows stretched across the familiar rooms, I knew this victory and the strength it had taught me would stay with me forever.